Okay, Dan, you're on.
Right. Good evening. This is the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting of Monday, April 11th. Let me call the meeting to order. Since Angela Javison is on vacation, I'm asking Peggy Kirby to sub for Angela. Would you take the roll, please?
I will. Daniel Stepanek,
Here.
Angela Jameson, absent. Beth Brunali,
Present.
myself, present, of course. George Perkins,
Present.
Anthony Silo,
Here.
Priscilla Wilkie. Priscilla?
Priscilla? She's here.
Oh, she's here. I see. You're muted. Penny Ross
Here.
and Beth Sanford.
Here.
All right, thank you. Penny, I would like to have you substitute for Angela. Since she's not here, would you be willing to do that?
Yes.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda, number 3 on the agenda, approval, I guess. Are there any comments or questions or deletions? And if not, can I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Peggy? And George is approving. Or seconding it.
Yes, okay.
Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting, March 21st. You all have a copy of that. Any comments, deletions? If not, can I hear a motion? I'll make the motion. Okay, who's going to second it?
Second.
Anthony's going to second it. Okay. Site visit minutes of March 28th. Again, if there's no comments or deletions or corrections, can I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Peggy?
Second.
George, all right. Applications to be received and if complete, scheduled for the regular meeting of May 16th. It's application number 21-22-37, 842 Ponus Ridge Road. And we would like to schedule a site visit on Wednesday, May 4th. Is there any, and that's a Wednesday, is there anyone, how many people can make May 4th? Raise your hands. So myself, George, Beth, Peggy, Beth again, and Priscilla. Okay. So we got enough. How about 7:30, or do you want to move it up a little bit? 7:30, is that too early or what?
7:30 works for me.
Anyone want to, is there anyone that 7:30 doesn't work for? 7:30 it is, okay. Open regular meeting, application number 1218 Smith Ridge Road, Timothy Kurt and Donna Bisanante. Before we hear presenters on this, I want to ask the commission members to I guess, no public hearing has been scheduled, but I want to have you look at it and analyze it when you hear it and see it, to see if any of the 3 guidelines for holding a public hearing apply to this. Okay. Now, let me read the guidelines just to refresh your memory.
Dan, could I just make one quick announcement? I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you skipped ahead. Can we just go back and update you on item number 8 that's on the agenda? I just wanted to let the commission members know that item number 8, which is the application for 320 North Wilton Road, is being continued. I do have that information in my staff report. I anticipate that additional information will be supplied for the prior to the May meeting, and I'll be distributing that in within prior to the May meeting. So I just wanted to update everyone that
Okay,
that one's still
good.
on hold and being continued. I apologize for interrupting you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So getting back to, I guess it's number 9 now. No public hearing has been scheduled, but I want for the commission members to take a look at it and decide what you think about maybe holding a public hearing. Now, to refresh your memory about what the 3 criteria are, let me take some time here. Number 1 is proposed activity may have a significant impact on wetlands or water courses. Now I have a litany about 7 or 8 different points here that describe a significant activity. I won't go through them, but at the end of the presentation, if there's anyone that wants to discuss it, please, and we will, and I'll go through them. Number B, receives, the commission receives 14 days within 14 days of the commission's receipt of the application, a petition signed by at least 25 people who reside in the town of New Canaan, each of whom are 18 years of age or older. That doesn't apply here. That would not apply here. Number C, the commission finds that a public hearing regarding the application would be in the public interest. Now that's wide ranging, and we would discuss that. Kathleen, is there anything you would like to discuss further on this?
I just made a note regarding, just for the record, no petition has been received in a timely fashion in order to send this to a public hearing. So that's number 1. And number 2, I have only had inquiries from one adjoining property owner, husband and wife. So the public interest likely does not apply as well. In addition, in reviewing the significant impact criteria, and many of the criteria very specifically lean towards substantial as a definition and requirement for the reasoning to go to a public hearing. And just the staff's comment is, I again, based on the staff review of all presentation materials, significant impact does not apply. In addition, I just want to say we have received these staff reports from the health department, the engineering department, and the P&Z department. All of this information was in your packets and has been provided to the applicant as well. And each has no further comments regarding the application. So that's.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just say something? I think we should be able to determine before we even start whether we need a public hearing. And based on the fact Kathleen's comments that the 14 days has passed and we have received nothing, that's irrelevant. And that there have, I think, 1 or 2 people maybe sent a letter or something. There's not 25 people, so that doesn't apply. And I think, I know when I looked at all the documents, it indicated that there was no substantial impact to the wetlands or any water courses near it. And maybe we could just, if there's any concern, we could just ask the parties that are and their experts that are here to present, just to confirm that there's no substantial impact here. And presuming that that is still the case, I'm not sure that we even need to discuss a public hearing. I could, that would be my thought.
All right, George, any comments?
Oh, the only comment I have, Kathleen, can a petition be sent in after 14 days, or is that mute?
Correct. The petition has to be filed in a timely fashion from the date of receipt. That time clock has come and gone, so no.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, then, as chairman, I think, does everyone agree with Peggy on that? Anyone? Yes, George. Oh,
Yes.
Raise your hand if you agree, if we should consider a public hearing or not. Let's
Which
not.
way? Or not, or
Or-
yes?
should we consider a public hearing? Raise your hand. No.
I think we have to, I think we have to at least consider it. I don't know that we should summarily, in a summary fashion, dismiss the possibility of a public hearing. And one question I had was the notices sent to the abutters within 100 feet. I may be incorrect, but it seemed like those notices indicated that we were going to have a public hearing. I don't know. Okay, I'll check.
Dan, Attorney Brooks is on the call, and if you would like her to reply to that, she's able to do so. A
All right.
public meeting is not a public hearing.
Okay,
Okay, so that's the clarification. A public meeting. is
okay,
a
thank you.
technology. Yeah.
Thank
it's
you for
not.
that clarification.
Okay.
Attorney Brooks, would you like to comment? Or was
Would
that
you like
your
me
comment?
to, just on this point about whether a public hearing should be held? Is that
Yes.
what you'd like me to do?
Yeah.
Okay, and so Attorney Janet Brooks, for the record, I represent Tim Kurt and Donna Bissonette, who live at 1218 Smith Ridge Road. I think that the pivotal word here is significant impact.
Yeah.
But I think by that, we have to understand significant adverse impact. And so our application is different than probably the vast majority of your applications that are coming in, which want to do things. And your job is to kind of push them out of the wetlands, push them further back into the upland review area. This is intentionally in the wetlands to be a benefit to the wetlands. This is strictly to benefit the wetland and the stream and the pond, to diminish sediment being carried down there. So if you think of significant impact in terms of significant adverse impact, I would say this is very different from your run-of-the-mill application. This is a benefit only. So I would argue this wouldn't qualify, wouldn't be a candidate for a public hearing.
Okay.
And can I just ask, can we,
Peggy?
I was just gonna say, can we also confirm that with Attorney Brian Smith? Or is he with you too, Janet?
Please, please. In fact, when I do the regular presentation, I'm going to turn and say, yes, and does.
I guess I
Attorney
just want to
Smith
make
agree?
sure.
So yes, please, please let him voice his opinion.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Brian Smith, representing Grace Farms Foundation. And I echo exactly what Attorney Janet Brooks said. This is a joint application. It's designed to reduce sedimentation and erosion and to benefit the wetlands and the watercourse in the pond.
Can I just ask a question here, if I can? From what I understand, the application has not been submitted in the time that it was supposed to be, right, Kathleen?
That is incorrect. That Commissioner Silo is speaking. Just remember, when you do speak, try to remember to say so-and-so for the record, because we've got a few people on this call. No, this is a completely submitted in a timely fashion, received last month's meeting. We did our site visit. Everything is on course for the presentation this evening. The only discussion was around whether or not to hold a public hearing. I think you've heard from.
Okay, yeah, understood. Okay.
Any other comments? But yeah, Beth?
That's Sanford speaking. I just have a question in terms of reading the materials. And I understand the whole objective in terms of preventing ongoing soil erosion, but it does state, just to bring this out so we don't overlook it, that there will be a permanent disruption of 400 square feet of wetlands. That's in the report.
That is true. That's right. That's right. But unlike, let's say, fill in the wetlands in order to put a shed, or fill in the wetlands in order to build an extension, this has a purpose of, conserving the wetlands. And sometimes in the conservation of things, one has to take an action right in the wetland itself.
Okay.
Okay. So if we're, I'm trying to decide if we're leaning towards a public hearing or not. And up until that last, the disturbing of 400 feet of wetlands, that may be a significant activity.
Well, I guess perhaps the issue becomes, this is one to protect the wetlands as opposed
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
opposed to destroy it. This is to help the wetlands. So 400 feet to help the wetlands, I guess the question is that substantial? Is it? It's certainly not substantially detrimental to it based on the reports that the experts in this case seems to have put forward.
Also, I just might add 400 square feet is 20 feet by 20 feet.
Right.
Right.
It's
Right.
the other question that Sanford, is okay if I speak, Dan?
Sure, yeah.
The other question is, if you don't do this, how much disruption will there be over time because you're not treating the wetlands? So I don't mean to bring that fat as an argument. I just wanted to make sure that that was brought out as one of the numbers that was in the report.
If it's appropriate for me to speak at this point,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think the decision is, it's something for you to consider is, if nothing is done, there's going to be continued erosion that goes down the steep bank into the stream and ultimately into the pond. So that's what we're judging it against.
Right.
And if our goal is to reduce that, that's what our joint teams have designed, to reduce that, to reduce the velocities, the sediment that is mobilized, what gets into the stream. And so that's, I think that's the context.
All right, then let's just forget the public hearing and let's start the presentations if we can right now.
So Mr. Chairman, in the absence of a public hearing, if you are concluding that a public hearing is not required, yes, the applicant may proceed with the presentation.
Yes, let's proceed. And I'm making the judgment that we're not going to have a public hearing on this particular application.
Just
I
give
would
me a
agree.
minute. Just give me a minute to. I'm sorry, that was Anthony Siller. I believe he said he agreed. I'm going to make Jake Schwartz a co-host. Is that correct?
Yes.
So he can share his screens. Okay, I'm going to do that right now. And Jake, you should be able to hear me and also be able to share your presentation materials. There we go.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. We've already kind of started to get into the facts of this, and I just wanted to say that this is a joint application between two neighbors that are about their common border. And so that's what our project is here about, to reduce the erosion that's occurring along our current border, our common border. And we came to this conclusion to do this as part of a settlement of environmental claims between Grace Farms and Tim Kurt and Donna Bissonette. And we've divided the task into two parts. And one is for Kurt and Bissonette to provide the application with the appropriate documentation from consultants with the agreement and input of Grace Farms. And the second task is that Grace Farms provide the materials and labor to construct the erosion control structures. So I will turn this over to Clay Emerson, an engineer with Princeton Hydro in a moment. He's also a PhD, to walk through this project along with George Logan, who is a soil scientist and wetlands biologist with Remit Ecological. But first, I would like to call on my co-applicant, Attorney Brian Smith, for him to say a few words on behalf of Grace Farms.
Thank you, Attorney Brooks. Brian Smith, representing Grace Farms Foundation. And we are working jointly with Mr. Kurt and Ms. Bissonette for the purpose that has been articulated in the application, which is to decrease and or eliminate as much as we can any further soil erosion or sedimentation in the wetlands and watercourse and pond. And in this effort that we've been working jointly with the team that Janet Brooks has assembled, as well as Michael Klein, who is our soil scientist and wetlands biologist, and Bill Stonebridge is on the line in studying how we will implement the program, physically construct and work it through. That was done all in consultation with each other. And you have the information already in your report, but Mr. Stonebridge is available tonight to answer any questions should you have any on the implementation of the program. But we have worked through, and everything you see here, all the parties have concurred. We had some internal discussions that, and we worked this to make sure we had every aspect of the development thoroughly vetted, and that all parties could make this work to the best benefit of the wetlands and water courses. So I'd like to turn it back to Janet Brooks now.
Okay, so I think that I'll invite Clay Emerson, the engineer from Princeton Hydro, to walk us through the project, please.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission for your time this evening, and especially for those who were able to get out there on the site visit. So yeah, just to give you a little bit of background on the site, if you're familiar with it, and also to kind of go through the issue at hand first. If you look at these photos are taken looking uphill along that common property boundary, as Janet noted. And what you see in these photos, obviously the two photos on the right are during or immediately following a rainstorm. The two photos on the left are on a sunny day or dry time period. And you see that there's fence posts there in that photo one. And you can see that there's been some erosion there. The concrete footings of the fence are exposed, and it's a relatively steep slope here. So we have some concentrated flow that's working its way down here. And if we look at photo 2, I believe it is, this is kind of a little bit further down, but still facing upstream. And there's concentrated flow, and you can see the turbid nature of the runoff that's going down this drainage path. And the other two photos, again, are facing upstream and show, more of the same. So we have a series of a flow path that flows down this hill slope in this narrow section between the paths. Again, I don't think this is a ditch or a channel that someone built at all. I think it's just concentrated flow during intense rainfall that comes through this narrow section here. And you see that there's material being transported. Both, you can see the evidence, the scour, you can see the turbid water that is a visual representation of material being moved down gradient. And of course that sediment laden runoff is ending up in the stream, the wetlands, and the pond on the Kurt Bissonette property. So as Mr. Smith noted, we've worked together, both myself, Mr. Logan, Mr. Klein, on behalf of Grace Farms, to come up with what we believe will be what's necessary to address this, but also as least invasive as possible in order to prevent the erosion and consequent sedimentation of this area. So what we're looking here is the erosion control plan. So this narrow section, this property boundary, is kind of diagonally across here, and it's kind of distinctly broken up into two sections. There's a steeper section that Jake is pointing out there. That was that first photo with the exposed fence posts. And you can see the topo there, the contours, how relatively close they are. These are 2-foot contours, I believe. And then you can see that abruptly as that slope meets the valley, the landscape form, that it's a much different slope. You can see very few contours there. So just a couple things to point out. There is a lot going on this, but I'll point out all the key features, and then obviously I'll turn it over to George, and we can certainly address any questions you may have. But there's a couple different things that we're proposing to address this erosion. So we're engineers, so we like to do calculations, and we did a bunch of those. And they were not surprising. They showed us that, yeah, you might, with a slope that is that steep and a drainage area that flows to this, you might expect to have some erosion there. So that was kind of the kind of commanding the obvious, if you will, but that's what we do as engineers. So so we're proposing in that steepest section to put some stone lining, and stone is our last resort. I mean, we as a firm, we pride ourselves in ecological approaches wherever and in any application that's possible. And we're able to do a little bit of that on this project as well. But the steeper section really required stone, and we followed the Connecticut guidelines on that portion of the design. And then as we get a little further down, there's a series of 3 check dams. There's the red squares there. And a check dam, you're probably familiar with that term. If you're not, think of it as like a speed bump for runoff. So it's a bump in the road, if you will. And the water that is flowing down this little speed bump, if you will, causes water to temporarily pond, filters out some sediment in the check dam itself, and it lowers the velocity so that it's much less likely to produce erosion and scour, and provides a more low energy setting for not just to prevent erosion and encourage the sediment and to fall out, but it also we think will enable us to get some vegetation established in some of those areas where it's not as dense as we would like it. So we worked again with Michael Klein, and of course George will talk about this, and we have a seed mix, also some plugs as well that he will talk about to go in that area, and some biodegradable poor fiber netting, not the plastic stuff. And so that's really the approach. You can see there's a little bit of stone at the tail end where it connects to the stream, where again we had some real more drastic erosion there, some larger gravel that was being moved. And the only other thing I think to point out, Janet, is the kind of purple area there. One other feature here that we worked with town staff that were very helpful is the septic field, the approximate septic field. And we couldn't do any stone lining within that 25-foot buffer. But one thing that was happening up at the top there is in extremely intense storms, runoff was bypassing out of the channel. And there's an existing stone wall there, dry laid stone wall, and it was flowing out and kind of in a different direction. So there's just basically some topsoil there to kind of fill the gaps between the existing kind of loose laid stone wall. And Janet, if there's something else you want me to point out on this, I'll be happy to do so. Otherwise, I will hand it over to George, who will explain the wetlands and some of the other aspects.
Good to hear from George Logan at this point.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll remain by and stand by on mute.
This is George Logan, but I see someone, I think Mr. Perkins might have a question.
George, do you?
He's muted.
Yes, George Perkins for the record. On the velocity and the incline, have you calculated that on a 10, 20, or 100-year basis?
Yes. And thanks for the question. We're engineers. We like to do that.
My
We like,
pleasure.
yeah, we like the number. So you can see here that we ran, and I don't need to go into too much detail on this, but we did run the 1, 2, 10, and 25-year storms and calculated a velocity. This table summarizes velocities. Those numbers are in feet per second. And we did some other things with those numbers as well. But we didn't go up to the 100-year storm, but I didn't think it was necessary to do that.
How
The
long is
velocity-
this? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the velocity, depending on the angle, can cause significant damage, particularly if there's boulders and so forth in the waterway. I've experienced it, so I've done a little bit of work and research on it. But I think a 25-year sounds very reasonable. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, this is Dan. How long is this in footage, this swell or swells?
You can see that the scale bar there is 60. So there's the steepest part there is about 60 feet of that. And he'll measure it kind of in real time here if I don't get him flustered while he's trying to do it. But the whole length is probably, I should have anticipated that question, but it's a couple hundred feet, it looks like. 195, that says roughly 200 feet, the entire length of the approach. And if you saw in those photos, it's a relatively narrow work area, because it's, for a good portion, there's 2 fence lines that make it, kind of a narrow workspace there. Yeah, so it's about 200 feet.
And what's at the end of it? What is it, continuation of this, or?
So what happens there? That's a good question, and perhaps we should have brought an extra photo, but I think I could explain it. So the main stream is running from top to bottom in this figure, and it's not shown, but it's kind of running in that direction there that he's pointing out. Excuse me. And so what's happening there is there's a confluence. This drainage swale or drainage path that, again, you saw the photos of, is flowing that way, and then it's joining with the main stem, the stream there that's flowing into the pond that's just off this image. So there's a confluence there, a 3-way intersection, if you will, with this drainage path meeting the stream. And if you go to the aerial photo, it's a little easier to see, but not particularly. You kind of lose the stream. I also should point out that the area just at this fence line and immediately north of it is wooded. It's fairly well shaded, which as George will point out, I don't want to steal his thunder, but the seed mix and also the plug, I think there's even a quart size plant in the planting plan, is fairly shade tolerant, as you'd expect. We don't have a lot of good light penetration because it's forested. But yeah, that's the area of the confluence there, to answer your question, Mr. Chairman.
And how deep is this? How deep is this?
When you say deep, do you mean the drainage feature itself?
Yes.
It varies. It's not very deep, but on average, it's probably on the order of a few inches. In some areas, it's a little bit more in size. I don't think it's more than a foot anywhere. Maybe it's deepest right near the confluence. So it is, I think the fact that the fences are there may have kind of, given it this kind of real linear look to it that you wouldn't normally see, but in some areas, it's a little more in size than others. So you're anywhere from a few inches to maybe a foot.
Anyone else have any questions?
You, Dan.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Brunelli. Is the erosion and the sedimentation just an issue for the property owners at 1218, or are any property owners further downstream impacted?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I would argue that anyone downstream is impacted, just it's more acute the further upstream, the closer you are to it. So the two property owners here who are the applicants are impacted in two different ways. Number one, the active erosion of their property. Number two, most notably for the downstream property owner, the settlement of the majority of that eroded sediment is going to end up in the pond. And that's not to say that some sediment and associated nutrients aren't working their way downstream of the pond, but certainly to a lesser degree. So your impacts are going to be most acute for the two property owners. And I would argue that anyone downstream is impacted, but at a decreasing level.
And the work on this swale, would it have any impact on the flow in the mainstream? So will the same flow still come through the swale and not impact the mainstream?
Yeah, that's another good question. So the goal of this project is not to really alter the flow rate or the total flow volume. The goal is just to arrive at a more stable stream channel itself. So, I wouldn't label this as a stormwater management project that's going to minimize flooding somewhere downstream. It's not going to do that. But it's also certainly not going to increase the flow in any way, shape, or form. It's just meant to stabilize the drainage feature itself.
Okay, so the flow between the mainstream and this channel will essentially be the same. It's just slowing down the velocity and improving where the sediment ends up for this particular channel.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Dan. Is there any type of filter on the streams, in the streams?
In the stream itself, like under existing conditions?
No, I mean, are you planning any type of filter? So what I'm worried about is the sediment going down the stream. Is there any way you can filter that out?
Yes.
And maybe
yes. Yeah, I can answer that. So the first, as I tell anyone, working on a project, like the first thing is to do is like, before you, address what you think is the problem, address the reason that there is a problem. So the first step in that process to me on a project like this is, well, I don't want there to be sediment to begin with, because I don't want to have to filter it out. So that's what the steep section, the stone lining in that very steepest part is like, hey, there's definitely sediment that's eroding here. Let's stop that. And then we'll filter out what else we need to. But first of all, let's stop the generation of the problem. So getting past that, and where Jake's pointing out now, are the 3 check dams. And these will work just like you're saying as filters. It's again, kind of like a stone speed bump, if you will, and water will flow through them. They have a 2 different size stone, and the water will pass through them, but organic matter and sediment will kind of filter out on the face of them or within them. And over time, we'll kind of build up and filter more and more sediment out. And then in between the check dams, and they haven't just arbitrarily been put here, they're spaced according to the topography, so that they're almost evenly spaced, but not quite as it worked out. So the check dams themselves will filter out sediment, and then most importantly, the vegetated stabilization in between them, as it becomes established, will do that the right way, the natural way.
This is Anthony Sillo here. Just the sizes of the stones you're talking about for these quote unquote steep bumps. What are we talking about? Like chunkier on the bottom and then finer on top?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So basically the check dam will have two different size stone. It's kind of like a D50 of about 4 inches within the center of the check dam or the speed bump. And then the stone on the face, the smaller filter stone, is number 3 Connecticut DOT stone. So that's a smaller size.
No, it makes sense as long as it's my big thing just through experience is that if it's pre-washed, then it won't have any clogs before we start filtering. So that's just my 2 cents. If it's pre-washed, I mean, it seems like it's a proper way to do it because it acts as like a riffle, right?
Right.
So with that being said, as long as it's washed, I mean, I don't see a problem there.
Yeah, I have a joke about washed stone and quarries. I say, the only way to get washed stone is to buy washed stone and then wash it yourself, because so much of the stone from the quarries is always so dirty. We don't have large quantities here, so we and the folks working with Mr. Smith at Grace Farms are real helpful, and they know their equipment. They seem to know their materials. So with these small quantities, stuff like that, which is a very good comment, we can make sure to incorporate.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, why don't you proceed with the, who's the next presenter?
So I'm the next
George
person
Logan.
here. Again, George Logan for the record, Rema Ecological Services. As you heard, I'm a soil scientist, been doing this for about 34 years, also professional wetland scientist and a certified senior ecologist. So I'll be quick because I think Clay stole all of my thunder. So the first thing I think that's important, as you see from this particular figure, is one task that I accomplished early on, and that was to do the delineation. We need to know where the regulated areas are, obviously. So there's a delineation, and that's a sketch map, and you can see it better in the other map. But for now, I delineated to there, at least that's what I'm showing at this point. All of the wetland soils, if you will, within the delineation on the Kurt Bissonette property are considered a quince. Those are disturbed, obviously, wetland soils. Then the soils on the Grace Farms delineations, which do not show here, those were done by Michael Klein, who's also a registered soil scientist. And those are not disturbed until you get right close to the actual swale. And those are, as you can see, Ridgebury, Leicester, Whitman, very poorly drained and poorly drained soils. So that was number 1. And there's a report in the record that's has an initial date of July 6, 2020, was revised for March 1. So that's one. There's also another report, which is sort of the cover letter for everything we've done here. So one thing I'd like to kind of quickly say is why are we doing this? Obviously, we have an erosional problem. And we've talked about the fact that what we're doing here is going to be a net enhancement in the long run to the regulated resources. And we do have a stream. Part of the stream is on Grace Farms because we sort of, if you will, flow into the stream on the upside or on the north side of the wall, which separates the two properties. So there is a little pool there, if you will, which unfortunately has been filled more and more with soil. And that's obviously a nice little habitat. And as you probably have heard from other people like myself, it's the fine sediment, not just the coarse sediment, that's the problem, because that will go for long distances. It starts covering the aquatic habitat of the stream. It acts, as was just said, as a fertilizer, especially phosphorus. It results in algal blooms, and you get these the habitat within the stream itself that's starting to be covered with scum, and that limits the amount of aquatic organisms, and then of course has a cascade effect on any other organisms that might be using aquatic organism using the stream. And of course, when it gets to the pond, which is to the south of this picture, maybe another 50, 60 feet, yep, just past there. That does a whole bunch of things. It can reduce oxygen. It can reduce penetration of light. It can increase temperatures and so on. So this is a real problem for the aquatic systems that are particularly downgrading of this feature. So one of the things that we did, and of course we work with Clay closely and with Mr. Klein also, and the approach that we took was sort of a hybrid approach between using the more, if you will, engineering approaches with we need to stop the water with these check dams. But that orange area that you see in between the check dams, we decided that that's not too steep. And we can, with, as was mentioned, with the biodegradable core fiber matting and with a specialized seed mix and some plantings, we can actually do something nice there. And you talked about filtering. So that's going to be one of our filters. We had to come up with a specialized seed mix, which is basically tailor-made. So we basically selected the species and the percentages, and we're going to send it to a vendor, and they're going to create this seed mix for us. We usually use Ernst Conservation Seeds out of Medville, Pennsylvania. And also we looked around and we said, okay, what's growing in shade around here? Because if you go back to my little figure, Jake, you'll see that there's, and this is a 2016 photograph, might be a little earlier than that, I'm not sure exactly, but you see some evergreens along our property boundary that were planted in the uplands, and they're very nice, and they've created this shading, and of course they're on the south side, so more shading. So we had to look around and see, okay, what's growing under the shade, and sort of select from that. And myself and also one of my associates who's a qualified botanist, Ms. Sigrun Godwin, she's a signatory also in one of our letters. So we selected that seed mix. We selected the live propagules. There's 250 plugs that we're putting in that section. And also we had, as Clay mentioned, quad pots, and that was basically cinnamon fern, which will grow in the shade, as you know. So the other thing I wanted to tell you, which is kind of interesting, you mentioned the filter. When you put check dams, and we've noticed this over the years, the check dams themselves, they have the ability to take the water through. And obviously what that does, it basically traps any sediment behind it. But of course, we're not trying to necessarily trap sediment. What we're trying to do is to slow down the water so we don't have erosion. So if what's going to be trapped behind these check dams is actually a good thing. So what we've noticed is when we do these check dams and there's no erosion and sedimentation issue anymore, we get these leaf jams behind them. And the leaf jams, and there's research that's been done, are the ones that become then filtering mechanisms, because there's microorganisms and bacteria and decay and so on that's going on that. And think of sometimes how we use these silt socks, which have compost in them, and they can filter all kinds of things. They can even filter the colloidal fraction of runoff that's coming to them. They're excellent in doing that. Wood chip berms, we use those. Same thing here. So that's kind of an embedded filtering system that we're putting in here. So that's kind of what is going on. I think, as has been said several times before, we believe that this is a net enhancement to the wetlands and watercourses. It's really taking care of an issue that's been longstanding, and that again, it's going to be a benefit. It's a 3-quarter acre pond or so that's going to benefit, and there's several hundred feet of perennial stream that are going to benefit from this application. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, but that's what I have for now.
Mr. Logan, Peggy Kirby, I had a question about the just a couple of the items that you're going to be using, that biodegradable coconut fiber core mat?
Mhm.
Is that what's going to have the seed on it?
No, that's what that's going to be, and that's a great question. We're using it for a number of reasons. One, because as you probably can imagine, if you just put seed down and then you have a rainstorm, someone downstream will benefit, but we won't. So the idea is to keep the seed embedded, so down into for contact with the soil so that it doesn't erode out. And then it's also a nice place that's going to stabilize that area whilst, for the first, say, growing season while things are growing until things are really stabilized. And then eventually it's going to biodegrade. By that time, the vegetation is going to be mature enough to withstand the flows and to do the job.
So about how long does it take? Does it take like a year to degrade?
That's a good question. I've heard anything between 1 and 3 years.
Okay, so it's a pretty substantial period of time.
Yes.
And if it happens to be like a very wet period and it's constantly being worn away, does that need to be does it need to be replaced? Does it lose its effectiveness?
Yeah, so that's something we talked about internally, and that is that there's going to be a period during which we're going to have to inspect and monitor. And that's probably usually the first growing season or a good portion of 2 growing seasons, depending on when this is done. So it might be the first year, if, say, for instance, if we did it this summer during low flows, which is probably what we would want to look at. We would look at it through fall, and then we might look at it next spring into, say, June, to make sure that things are stabilized, sort of a monitoring. And if there is an issue, obviously we'd have to correct it.
So you're all in agreement that that's what you would do. You'd monitor it, and if it needed additional work in it, you would take care of that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is Dan. Do these dams have to be cleaned manually, periods? I'm handicapped because I can't visualize what these dams look like. So I may be asking simple questions, but I still can't vision what this dam looks like, these stone dams.
Check dams.
Or check dams. Do the occupants, the residents there have to clean these dams at all?
That's not the intent. The intent is for us to be able to put them in, monitor them for a reasonable period of time, and then that should be self-maintained. But I would have Clay and Jake maybe put that. Do we have possibly a detail of one of those check dams, so that would give us a better visual?
Well, I think I could probably explain it better than the detail will
Okay.
show, quite frankly, because it's just the way details are, unfortunately. But so sometimes you'll see check dams along a swale or something, along a roadside swale or something. But Mr. Chairman, I think that the thing to imagine is just you have this swale, this drainage feature that's running along the property line here, roughly from west to east. And the check dam would just be perpendicular to the flow, and it would be a small, I'm trying to get my hands in the image here. Like I said, speed bump, if you will, crossing perpendicular to the flow.
Right.
But it will be porous, clean washed stone, and it will tie into high grade on both sides so that water doesn't, you've seen people do this in the parking lot, drive around the speed bump, like the water will have to flow over the speed bump, if you will, and through it. So I think George, you used the analogy, or someone used the analogy of a riffle in a stream. It's kind of similar in looks to that, where you have stones crossing a channel, water has to flow between the stones or over them. It's kind of the same thing, but here we're in not in a stream setting. We're just in this drainage feature. So it's a narrow berm, if you will, of stone, but it sounds much more, you know, the term dam and the berm, it's not, it's something that you, if, when and if this is built in a matter of years, if you were walking just in a matter of a couple growing seasons, you might not notice it. You know, as George said, it would kind of have been grown in, there would have been some leaves collected. It wouldn't look like any kind of engineered structure. I think that the top width of this thing is only a little more than a foot, or so, on the order of a foot wide. So, and it slopes down. So, I think the speed bump analogy is the best I can do, in that it's maybe a little higher than a speed bump that you would drive over. And of course, it's made of clean washed stone, so water can flow through it, but it's only about a foot wide at the top. And so it's not particularly large or something. Like I said, after a growing season or two, it would kind of become kind of grown in, and it wouldn't look like anything that really, you know, was an intentional engineered structure at all. That's really our goal here.
So this is Anthony Sillo. Would you mind, I understand Dan's question, and I do kind of understand where you guys are coming from as well. Is there something that we can do over the course of the project, or like 6 months into the project, and just make sure that these speed bumps, as we're calling them, are just clear for like the first couple months, just to make sure? Because I do have the same concern that Dan has, just because that the leaves and everything will clog up those stones. I mean, I know they're bigger stones, so it shouldn't be that bad, but at the same token, I do understand his question. I think that maybe we should have something in there that just says, hey, let's just check these things out, just to make sure that they're the water, because once those things get clogged, the water will go over them, right?
Correct.
And we're not saying that they're going to get clogged. I think the biggest thing is, if and when they do, is there going to be some sort of a procedure that say, okay, we did all this work and you guys have done all this background work. Now we're just kind of, you know, going backwards. So is there anything that we can put in place that just says, hey, can we check these things once a month, or, you know, for the first 6 months, and just make sure that everything looks good, especially during the fall season?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. I don't know if, George, if you want to weigh in on that as part of the other kind of checkups that we plan to do
Sure.
to make
I
sure
mean,
vegetation is being established as well.
anytime we establish vegetation, we need to take a look for a period of time. So during that time, we can also check the check dams. Now, the thing I didn't want people to think that having leaf jams behind those is a bad thing. It isn't. That's kind of a natural thing that happens in any natural situation, and leaves are not a bad thing. They actually are the energy that provide energy to the streams and to the pond. So all I'm saying is that naturally what I've seen is that leaf jams can be behind these, and then they kind of move on, if you will. But it's not a matter of erosion or something that's going to compromise the effectiveness of the speed bump, if you will, to get those velocities low so they don't erode anymore.
Yeah, and the other thing to address Commissioner Sillo's question is, there will be storms where these will overtop, whether they're clogged or not. You know, there are those large storms that occasionally happen, and that's okay. But the way that these things will work is that when they do overtop, you know, if you're flowing over the first check dam, the most upstream one there in the center of the image, that water is going to be flowing, you know, if you're at a storm where that one is overtopping, that water is going to be flowing into the temporary ponded water created by the next downstream one. So you kind of encourage that low energy stair step approach instead of just a straight chute going downstream. You've got this stair step approach, so that when they do overtop, it's in a non-erosive fashion, because whether they clog or not, there will be storms that, you know, that will certainly overtop these, and that's okay.
No, yeah, Anthony, sorry, I'm not worried about that. And no, I understand, like, there's gonna be, listen, we've had a lot of rain in the last 2 years that have, done a lot of damage, not just to, potentially these. I just feel like if we're gonna be doing it, if we could check it just from natural, leaves going downstream, junk going downstream. It is a narrow section that we're talking about. I don't have a problem with it. I think you guys done a great job. I just wanted to make sure that we look into it, after it's completed.
Yeah, we can put that as a special condition. We need a site person on this. All you got to do is walk it, I think, and see if they're working. The other thing I have is what we don't want, what we can't have, is any added increased sediment downstream from any of this. And we want to be assured that there's no increased sediment downstream from anything you're doing here. Can we assume that? Anybody want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, that's as big a concern for us and for the applicants as it is the commission, I believe. In other words, this whole purpose of this project is to minimize sediment, first erosion and two, discharge from this area. So
Yes.
That is our number one goal. That's what we were tasked to do. So I don't like failing, and we're going to do everything, and we've done everything to this point to ensure that doesn't happen, both during construction and certainly most importantly for the long term, because any sediment that comes out of here is I mean, the stream is right there, and just off this image is the pond that's going to be the recipient of the vast majority of that sediment, especially the coarse grained material. So that is our number one objective here, for sure.
Any other questions? Janet, are there more people presenting?
No, but
now?
I have a few comments that I'd like to make, but I'd like to ask Clay specifically. There were written comments submitted by the Marquetas home household, and I wanted to ask you if you can identify, even, I realize it's off this map, but the direction of where their house is and whether there will be an adverse impact to them from this soil erosion project.
Yes, thanks for that. So the residence that she's talking about is not on this plan view, and it's just a little over 1,000 feet north. And so not only is it 1,000 feet away, but it's also 1,000 feet away upstream. So this drainage feature flows roughly to the east, joins the stream that's flowing due south. And the property that we're talking about is almost due north, about 1,000 feet. So they will never see any of the water that flows through this drainage feature. They will never see any of the water that flows in the stream once it crosses this property line. And then there's also, for what it's worth, this is kind of a wooded area, so there would be no way for them to even physically see it unless they were on either of these two properties. So yeah, I don't really see any mechanism for any impacts or perception of impacts even at that property. They wouldn't receive any of the benefits of it either, for that matter. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
That's fine. I wanted to just make a few comments because the Marquetas home household did submit some documents for the agency's review. And one of the comments was that they wished this agency to not issue a decision until the Army Corps of Engineers issued its approval. And I think the Army Corps answered them in an email, which they provided in their packet, which said it's not uncommon for applicants to go to the local wetlands agency first. And the Army Corps sets out correctly that each level of governmental approval is independent of the other. And you start someplace, you go someplace first, and you go to the next place second. And so that was the choice here, and it's not inappropriate. And so there's no reason for the wetlands agency not to issue a decision, because there's also something that will be required by the Army Corps at another time. And finally, Marquetos Homes suggests that you, the agency, might want to consult with your town attorney, because the Marquetos Homes believe that the Finley Supreme Court case fits this fact pattern. And I happen to be the attorney representing the Commissioner of Environmental Protection in the Finley case at the Superior Court level. And the facts are quite different. And Attorney Brian Smith and I have discussed this. The Finley facts were, at the end of the public hearing, the applicant had run out of time. Changes had been made to the application, and the sedimentation and erosion control plan didn't catch up to the new transformed application. And so the applicant said, just put in a condition that says we'll submit an updated sedimentation and erosion control plan consistent with state guidelines to the satisfaction of the staff. But it meant that the public, the others, didn't get a chance to comment on it because they were running out of time, the 65 days with extension. And the Supreme Court said, no, something as critical a piece as the sedimentation and erosion control plan can't be left to staff consideration later. Well, that's not what we did here. We didn't come to you and say, we know we've got a problem, give us an approval, and we say, we'll do it in conformance with, the state guidelines. No, we've said, here's our approach, here's our plan, here's what we're going to do. We'd like your approval. So I don't think that Finley and Brian Smith and I discussed, we don't think it fits at all in this fact pattern. And we don't think it's a reason that you need to put this off for a month while consulting the town attorney, because it really it doesn't fit this pattern at all. So before closing, I would just like to invite Attorney Brian Smith, if you have any final words to add to this, and otherwise I thank everyone for their attention.
Thank you, Janet. I would just say that the applicants have worked very hard over several months planning this and going through in sometimes a seemingly excruciating detail to make sure that when we presented this application to you, the commission, that we had available to us the answers that we anticipated and hoped would satisfy your concerns. That's all the more reason why when Attorney Brooks and I discussed the Finley case, he said this doesn't match that at all, because we have worked out all the details to the point where we can present it to you as a complete package, and for your review and hopefully your approval. I wanted to thank you for not only your attention tonight and to all the very good questions, but also for those commission members who came out in a windstorm and freezing temperatures on the first sidewalk, along with a few of us at that sidewalk. So thank you.
Kathleen, are you there? Kathleen?
Yes, I am.
Oh, listen, have you heard from the residents downstream on this at all?
No, the only individual that has provided any information were Marquetos and Holmes at, I don't know their address actually, but it's the location 1,000 feet north of the proposed activity. They have provided some documentation, and as part of their documentation, they did say in their cover letter that they do not oppose they're not opposed to the joint applicants remediating the erosion controls. So that was actually added. Other than that, I have not heard from anyone downstream. The downstream person is actually the co-applicant,
Yeah.
Kurt Bissonette.
Okay, I see what you're doing. Okay. Do you
Dan,
have any yes.
it's Commissioner Brunelli. I had a couple more questions if that's
Oh,
if that's
go-
okay.
Go. Yeah.
One question I had was, how long is this project going to take in terms of, putting the stone in and building the check dams?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I could probably tackle that. The idea would be to get it done as quickly as possible. We've talked to the folks at Grace Farms, including the gentleman there who is in charge of their facilities. They have the know-how, they have the equipment, they've already looked at materials. The goal would be to get this done as quickly as possible. In terms of an actual duration, I mean, I think this could be certainly done within a week. I don't know if we've gone any further in estimating that, but it's not a big area. So we don't think this is a real heavy lift from a construction standpoint. Obviously, they'll need to work around the weather, and they'll need to make sure that all their materials are lined up before they do anything. And there's things that come up, but with good weather, I think a week is certainly reasonable.
Okay, and in terms of equipment, what type of equipment will be used and how will it access this site?
Yeah, and another good question. So we've talked with them about this as well, because if you can't build it, it'll never work. And they will be using equipment that will come from the Grace. It's off this image as well, but it will be coming from the Grace Farms parking lot there. And there's kind of like their community garden type thing that they have. There's some small material storage that goes on there now. And they'll be using track equipment that they have. It will come down from the west, from the Grace Farms property, to access this area.
Is in the materials, it was referring to sort of temporary disturbances. Is that sort of the area that's going to be temporarily disturbed where the equipment is coming through?
Yeah, that's like the closest area that has like pavement right up against turf grass. It's the kind of the easiest, shortest path or combination of those two things that is available here. Because we have the complication of crossing the stream if we came from the east, and everything that goes along with that. So yeah, it would come from that side for that reason. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. And then this may be a question out of ignorance, but I'm sure the owners at 1218 don't want any polluted materials going onto their property just as much as we don't want it going into the wetlands. And I know Grace Farms has identified material. Is there any assurance to the commission or a way to have assurance to the commission that the materials going directly into the wetlands are clean materials?
Yeah, it's not an ignorant question at all. If there ever was such a thing. I mean, so the stone will be clean washed stone from quarry, so it's not it's not something we would expect there to be any kind of contamination. Obviously, it's going to be washed, so even the sediment that's typically on quarry stone will be minimized, never completely eliminated, but hopefully as eliminated as physically possible. There's very small amounts of soil being imported here, so it would be in everyone's best interest that was clean. We'll make sure of that. Other than that, it's the core netting that we talked about, the biodegradable material, and the of course the seed and the plant stock. So there's nothing that we should expect to be have any kind of contamination or anything like that. And it's relatively small quantities. And the folks at Grace Farms who are procuring most of these quantities, this material, you know, they have, they've already identified some sources for some special stone and things like that. So with the small quantities and the attention to detail here, I feel pretty confident that that we wouldn't be importing anything that would be contaminated or you know, importing any sediment that's ultimately going to end up in one of the co-applicants' pond here.
Clay, have you got a list of suppliers that would help you out on this?
So Mr. Stonebridge from Grace Farms they've already reached out to a supplier on the stone because there were some special, you know, the stone, most quarries just generate the typical DOT mixes for stone. And one of those was like a little larger than we kind of preferred for this project because we don't want to be putting some, you know, big stone down. So they were able to get a supplier for kind of a custom gradation for stone, as opposed to just the standard DOT mixes. So I don't recall who that was, or I'm not even sure I know who that was, quite frankly, but they've already started looking at that. George mentioned the seed. Ernst Seed is pretty standard. They make the custom mixes. I don't know the nursery. George, if you know the nursery that you typically use in this area.
Yes, for the plugs, we usually pre-order up to New England Wetland Plants Inc. They're in Bradley, Massachusetts. They moved from Amherst. So yeah, that's the usual area where we go.
And do they supply the cord netting as well? Most of the
They could, or we could go to another vendor. Yeah, they have several.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other?
Sorry,
No.
Commissioner Brunelli again. Assuming you received approval from our commission, when do you anticipate that you would be able to commence the project? It sounds like you may have to get Army Corps of Engineers approval as well.
I want to jump in before Clay answers that because
I was going to hand it right over to you, Attorney Brooks.
Right, it will, first we're going to go then run this through the Army Corps. So I can't say how quickly. We'll have to wait to see exactly what kind of general permit that we fall under, et cetera. So I couldn't say at this point.
Okay.
Do you
And if-
need any other permits besides Army Corps? Attorney Brooks?
Not off the top of my head. Brian, do you want to correct me?
And I don't believe there's any other permits required. And I think that's why we had Lynn Brooks Abney with us, and that's my recollection. But unless Kathy Holland has some knowledge that I don't have.
No, that's correct. I can find Lynn's email. I believe I sent it to all of you. She did review the application packet. And I don't want to quote her, but your disturbance area is below the threshold that would require anything from in the way of planning and zoning review. So I'm sorry, I don't have it at my fingertips, but no, there's no other local permit required.
So they would have to come out and look at it just like we did. Is that correct? Or can they just approve it from an application of some sort?
Are we talking about the Army Corps?
Yes, yes.
I do believe that George Logan spoke to the staff of the Army Corps a number of months back, and there was some hopes / expectation this might fall under either a self-verified permit, a general permit. George, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, the way that the Army Corps deals with these things nowadays is remotely. So they don't do a lot of, they're very understaffed, unfortunately. So there will be a discussion. There might or might not be a Zoom meeting. There might or might not be additional information supplied. But my full expectation is that this will fall under self-verification.
Yeah.
This is Commissioner Bernelli again. In the hypothetical event that the Army Corps of Engineers made some change to your proposal or to your plan, would you be coming back to this agency, whether it was the commission or to Kathy Holland as the agent to advise us of that change?
Absolutely. And I suppose it depends on the degree of modification. And I would certainly be guided by your staff. But certainly if it's something brand new, you know, a whole new avenue to explore, of course, we'd be coming back to the full commission.
Kathy, do you think that if we approve this, we need a, what am I saying, a site, a site person that goes out and checks this on a regular basis?
Well, I can say, just kind of summarizing and listen to all the presenters this evening, two possible special conditions you might wish to consider. I believe Mr. Logan, definitely the group has agreed that an inspection and monitoring perhaps over for 2 growing seasons and replace or repair any issues that they seem to have already be in agreement on doing. And that's more for the long term, and to make sure that the project is suitable and that the everything goes according to schedule. If you're talking more on an actual engineer type to review the installation of the project, that would be an additional requirement, and certainly potentially advisable to do on this project. I don't feel as though this group is going to be hands off at this point in the game, but maybe they can speak a little bit further on that. And then the other potential special condition is, upon completion of the landscaping activities, a final report by the landscape architect shall be filed with staff prior to the final inspection by the staff. So maybe Janet or someone could speak about what your inspection monitoring will be going forward. I don't know if you have an arrangement between the parties regarding the actual installation and making sure things are done correctly throughout the project.
I would actually invite George Logan to address this, and what you're used to submitting as part of completion of project. George?
Certainly. I mean, it depends on the project, and there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But since we have a planting program, the first thing that I need to say is that I usually, depending on when it's done, I will do an end of a season inspection overall to look at the overall construction, if you will, how things are going in the planting, in the seeding. So that would be something that I would do, say, in late October, early November. And then depending, again, what I see, at a minimum, I will have a further inspection the next spring season. And that usually will go down to late May, early June, or possibly earlier, depending on what I saw in October, November. So if I thought things were not progressing as fast as I thought, I might get out there in April. Say late April, to see if we have germination and things are growing well. And again, depending on what I see so that will be year 2, I will recommend or not a year 3 inspection and monitoring. And there will be a memo for certainly the one that I would do in the fall, and certainly the one that I would do in the spring. And if there are intermediate times that I would have to go out there myself or my staff, or if I thought there was an issue that's above my pay grade, if you will, and call Clay out or Jake, those would also be notify the town staff with memos or emails at a minimum.
Penny, let me ask you, you heard that. How do you feel about that? Are you okay with that? Penny? Whoops. All right, I guess.
Sorry, is that directed to me? I'm sorry about that. Is that directed to
No,
me?
I asked Penny,
Oh.
Penny Ross, if
Oh.
if she had heard what George said about the plantings and things. I just wanted to know if you had any comments on that, Penny Ross.
Oh, my God.
No, okay,
You're good.
you're good. All right, anything else from anybody?
Just Commissioner Brunelli again, just a point of clarification, the possible special condition for checking the vegetation are we suggesting that be limited to the vegetation, or would that include the check dams as well?
That would include the check dams.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The
It would,
one
it would
thing,
include everything that we've done.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
yeah, this is Dan again. The one thing I want really to be assured of is that there's no increased sediment downstream. Any place. I mean, like we don't want to add any sediment to the pond, to the, if we, to the brook, to anything. And that's important, I think, because the residents don't, don't want that and don't anticipate that. So,
That's fully understood.
okay. Should we take a vote, everybody? Any more questions? All right, can I have a raise of hands? Any other comments from the applicant?
No, I think we've said our fill. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
can I have a raise of hands on approval of this application with the two special conditions that Kathleen mentioned? All right,
Should this be in
Dan?
the form of, should this be in the form of a motion?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, yeah. George, you want to make the motion?
Yes, I move we accept the application with the special conditions listed.
Second, Anthony Silla.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Is there anyone that is not approving this? Speak, I don't have everybody on my screen, so, all right. The motion's been approved with those two special conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank everyone.
Thank you,
Excellent
Mr. Chair.
presentation. Thank you very much.
Commissioner members.
Have a great night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is that over?
No, we still have Kathleen's report.
Okay, Kathleen, are you there? Yep. Any
Yes.
comments? Do you want to discuss? Yeah, I see you have two administrative action. Do you want to discuss those?
Yes, so two administrative wetland applications were issued over the last month or so, or a couple of weeks now, actually, for some projects located at 54 Bridle Path Lane involving a pool concept, and we had some additions at a project on Ponus Ridge Road. One is underway and the other is going through the permitting process right now with the building inspector's office, or I think it's nearing getting their permit issued at this point in time.
Okay. Before we adjourn, and in closing, I would like to make an important announcement. Reluctantly, I am announcing that 9-year commission veteran Penny Ross is resigning from the commission after tonight's meeting. And I want to thank Penny for a job well done. Personally, I want to thank Penny for sharing her knowledge and help in many wetlands areas, especially when it comes to identifying plants and invasive plants. For us and also for wetlands applications, it was very helpful and important in helping us make an excellent decision. For example, I have learned more about Phragmites in the past few years to last me 2 lifetimes. And I want to thank Penny for that. So on behalf of the entire commission, Penny, I want to again thank you again and wish you the very best. We will definitely miss you. And I hope you'll come back to visit us sometime. And would anyone else like to wish Penny her very best?
Well, I would like to wish me my very best. I only want you all to know that I'm resigning only because I'm no longer going to be a resident of New Canaan. I'm moving all of 5 miles away, not to an old people's home, but to another house. I've had, one of the really revealing things to me when I first came on the commission was I thought that inland wetlands involved, like I live next to a river. I thought it was all about rivers and stuff. And it turns out it's all about soil. So I didn't know that, but I know it now. So good luck to all of you. Keep up the good fight. I love Kathleen. I love Dan. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Penny. We miss
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Penny. And after that, we must adjourn. We should adjourn. Yeah. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you
night.
all.
Good night,
Right.
everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
We didn't hear from Kathleen.